Es el turno ahora para el Dr. Roger Hoisin y su conferencia Shale Gas in the USA and its Economic Implications for Trinidad and Tobago's Energy Sector. El Dr. Hoisin es profesor de la Universidad de West Indies en Trinidad y Tobago y es doctor en Economía de la Universidad de Cambridge, Inglaterra. Demos paso al Dr. Hoisin.
I'd like to say thank you to the university for inviting the University of the West Indies to take part in this important conference involving integration in the wider Caribbean. This specific presentation will focus on shale gas, and this here is a picture of Asafa Powell. He had the world record in the 100 meters for the time period May 2005 until 2008. When this guy here came, everybody should know that he's Usain Bolt, and broke the world record 9.58. Usain Bolt is the tallest 100-meter athlete ever in the history of the 100-meter race. And in Jamaica, I am of the view that we would see going into the future many more athletes participating in the 100 meters of this height. In many regards, Bolt represents a game changer to the energy market. And I use that analogy to bear reference to the shale gas revolution in the USA, which to me represents a game changer to the energy market. Now, Trinidad and Tobago is a very important player in the integration movement within the CARICOM sphere. Trinidad and Tobago alone, 25% of Trinidad and Tobago exports go to CARICOM, and about 75% of intra-regional exports is accounted for by Trinidad and Tobago. It is a major player within the region. It has, however, over time, become a mature oil producer. It has produced about 3.5 billion barrels of oil thus far, which, while it's very high per capita, I was reading about the Colombian economy this morning and yesterday. I noticed Colombia produces about 1 million barrels a day, which is about 365 million barrels a year, which is close to what Trinidad and Tobago produces if we take barrels of oil equivalent. So if we take natural gas and convert it into barrels of oil and add natural gas plus crude oil together, we produce about 320 million barrels a year. So it is an economy with a lot of hydrocarbon production. In fact, you see some of the details here. You see natural gas production. And in the last column, you would see that over time, Trinidad and Tobago has become really a natural gas producer. So we have moved away from being a crude oil producing economy in the main, just about 29 million a year, towards one in which we produce 90% of total output comes from the natural gas sector. The economy, like Colombia, is very dependent on the petroleum sector. Foreign direct investment in the petroleum sector accounts for about 92% of total foreign direct investment. Petroleum exports accounts for about 87% of total exports. Government revenues from the energy sector accounts for about 60% of total exports. And total economic activity, about 50% come from the energy sector. So that petroleum plays an important role in the Trinidad and Tobago economy. In fact, a very worrying attribute of the Trinidad and Tobago economy is that transfers and subsidies, including fuel subsidy, now account for about 60% of government expenditure. Now, against that backdrop, we had a change taking place in the global economy. We always knew that Jamaicans could run. We always knew that some tall people could run, but we never knew that a tall person, 6.5 feet, could run the way Bolt ran. Similarly, we always knew that there were various deposits of shale gas in many different places, hydraulic fracturing, a changing technology, was able to unlock significant amounts of shale gas deposits in the USA. And as we can see here, Argentina also has very significant deposits, as does China and some other economies. So that shale gas will bring onto the market, providing the technology can be copied from the USA to these other economies, significant amount of natural gas. As we speak today, the price of natural gas, the price of crude oil is about $83. It has started to go downwards because the increased output of shale gas and shale oil has started to create excess supply in the global economy, and so this excess supply has started to manifest itself in a decrease in the international price of oil, West Texas Intermediate. This here shows discoveries by the US on a yearly basis. So the first column shows the amount of gas discovered each year. It shows proved reserves in the second column, and the third part of the table shows US gas production on a daily basis, which has been increasing significantly. Now, I know there are a lot of students here. I hope some of these students here are economics students, and I hope that they're familiar with the term co-integration. Co-integration is a statistical concept we use in econometric theory. Co-integration means that over time, two variables tend to move together. So over time, what we had was the price of oil and the price of gas tended to move together over time. It tended to be co-integrated. So I took a statistical look at the data. First, I plotted here, and you would see that over time, the Henry Hub benchmark price of gas and the West Texas Intermediate price of oil has been drifting apart over time. And this is largely because of the great or the heavy degree of production of gas by the US economy. Now again, relating it to economic theory for the benefit of the students, drawing on something called the Rybczynski theorem and something called the Dutch disease theory. What we would expect is that relative factor prices between two geographic blocks would equilibrate over time. Such has been the increase in shale gas production in the USA and the impact of shale gas production in the USA on Henry Hub prices in the USA, that factor prices between the USA and, say, Europe has not been equilibrating. We don't have holding, this term you would learn from the Heckscher-Ohlin theorem, factor price equalization taking place as yet. Just did some, again for the benefit of the students, some testing. Did augmented Dickey-Fuller testing, KPSS testing, and also ran a formal Johansson maximum likelihood co-integration test. And it showed that no co-integration exists over time between the price of oil and the price of gas, which is something that the literature would support. It would support the fact that heavy production of shale gas in the US would now cause a breakdown in co-integration, so the variables will not move together over time. They will now move apart with time. And here we see some manifestation of that, in that LNG prices in Asia and LNG prices in the EU are very different from natural gas prices in the US, where in the US it is very much more depressed than in the other geographic blocks. In Japan, after the Fukushima nuclear disaster, we see that in that economy a lot of natural gas has been imported. This here, in a sense, is the distribution of LNG exports and imports throughout the global economy. And Trinidad and Tobago, tiny island just off Venezuela, see that is minus 13.7, which means that it's a net exporter of LNG in the global economy. Many of the economies here are net importers. This diagram here shows over time how it is the shale gas influence in the US economy affected Trinidad and Tobago LNG exports. You see the yellow part of this graph here, how it decreased in size over time, indicating, in the first instance, that U.S. imports of LNG decreased, and secondly, that U.S. imports of LNG from Trinidad and Tobago decreased. This year extrapolates and builds on the literature. It shows if it is you have benefited from an increase in one particular factor of production, you would expect that the output of the commodity that uses that factor of production intensively would increase. And if we look closely at this graph here, in particular at this line here, you would see that energy-intensive exports from the U.S. has been increasing. And that has significance for this region. That has significance for the energy producers of this region. And certainly, those economies within the region that produce energy-intensive goods would need to be prepared to see into the future prices falling for some of these goods, as we have started to see in some of the energy products. Now, what I did at this point is I took a statistical approach. I looked at the Trinidad and Tobago economy closely, and again, whilst the numbers may not make sense, I'm calling out some of the terms for the benefit of the students, and I used something called reveal comparative advantage and the trade complementarity index to calculate who is the best trading partner for Trinidad and Tobago. Now, the best trading partner would be one whose export structure aligns with the other import structure. The best trading partner, to repeat, would be one whose export structure aligns best with the import structure of another economy. So that Trinidad and Tobago and Colombia may not necessarily find it easy to trade at the surface one with the other, certainly because both are hydrocarbon abundant economies. But certainly, we may be able to sell to Colombia some carnival and some reggae music and some calypso music. And certainly we could import from Colombia some footballing talent of the nature of James Rodriguez and so on. So this, I went on to show the trade complementarity index and show that whilst we have lost the US market and Colombia would sooner or later need to probably think along this line for some of its energy products, we have looked and there are other players such as Dominican Republic, Argentina, Chile, and Brazil, and Mexico, which has a greater degree of complementarity with the Trinidad and Tobago economy in terms of their import structures more closely aligned with our export structure. And to me, all discussions on integration, should start with trade complementarity. We have signed a lot of trade integration agreements in the CARICOM, including with Colombia. And we do very, very, very little trade with these economies because, in my mind, the trade agreements were unscientifically pursued. They were based upon negotiations and discussions without paying sufficient reason to the scientific basis, which should be complementarity. And so the utilization of these various trade agreements, some CARICOM economies have entered into, hasn't worked well at all. It has remained very poorly utilized. What is the implications of all this for Trinidad and Tobago? Shale gas has revolutionized natural gas markets and has impacted and will no doubt continue to impact global petrochemical and LNG markets. Like other major global players, Trinidad will be similarly affected by increased supplies from the USA. Thankfully, the LNG producer in Trinidad and Tobago had the foresight to diversify its market years ago. Even so, it cannot be complacent by believing that other producers will not divert their attention to its current market base as well. However, several factors still remain in Trinidad and Tobago's favor. The world is expected to continue to demand more gas than it supplies. By being a first mover, Trinidad and Tobago's plants have a lower cost base and were built around 1996 to 2002, when the price of oil was much lower. Factor inputs into the building process are now much costlier. So, certainly moving forward and in line with the thematic outline of the conference, the Petro-Caribe arrangement itself now seems under threat, and certainly to me seems on the border of crashing. And Jamaica in particular is one CARICOM and one Caribbean economy that is heavily dependent on Petro-Caribe. And it may be now up to Trinidad and Tobago in particular to find a parallel arrangement to Petro-Caribe to help bail out some of these CARICOM economies moving forward into the future, where we will need to have to find, probably to work with the Caribbean Development Bank, to find an appropriate financing regime and methodology wherein Trinidad and Tobago could provide LNG and other petroleum products to very much in need CARICOM economies that turned partly in desperation to Venezuela. But now, and especially if the shale gas revolution continues and continues the downward trend in oil prices, which is currently about $83.44, especially if it goes towards the $60 marker, the Venezuelan economy, I have read, based upon IMF Article 4, needs about a US $120 per barrel to break even for the budget to balance. So at $83.88, the economy is at the surface and based on those numbers in problems. So that Trinidad and Tobago will now, moving forward, need to play a greater role, maybe in a smaller circle, within the CARICOM sphere as an integration partner. Thank you.